All right, let me quickly check whether everything is working. And this one is. Check sound as well. It's maybe a good idea. Don't hear any sound here. Why don't I hear sound? No, that's because my headset is not connected. That makes a lot of sense. All right, let's see. All right, that's better. To make sure I don't go mad hearing myself. All right. Looks like they are working. Discord is as well, right? Yeah, Discord is as well. All right. So I've been wanting to do this live stream or this set of live streams for some time. I'm not quite sure yet what it'll be. At least at the beginning, it will definitely be me just getting used to talking while thinking and doing things. And if it's good content at the same time, that's nice as well, I suppose. But first foremost, it's just me getting used to keep using my voice instead of my thoughts in order to like think through stuff. But yeah, basically the last 2 years I've been working on this project somewhat behind the scenes, not really showcasing anything. But I think that's now going to change a little bit. Let's see. All right. So, OrbitMines. Let me quickly go through some logistics and basically some quick history on OrbitMines, and then I'll go into what I'm actually doing right now. So the name OrbitMines is like an artifact from a project I did many years ago, which was basically a Minecraft server. So that's the origins of the name, and under that name I'm basically putting the current projects. So if you want to check that out, you can see that there. The same for Discord. I've set up a Discord for this project. You can find some older stuff from the Minecraft community there as well, including some stuff on the current project. So I'm hoping to do these streams somewhat consistently, mainly to introduce people to the things I'm thinking about. Hello, Casper. And yeah, so the current setup is that I'm streaming on many platforms at the same time. The primary one is probably going to be like YouTube or Twitch, but I'm like funneling them all through Discord. So I should be able to see, probably not all the chats from all the platforms work, but they're all synced through Discord, similar to how we had it set up for the Minecraft server, linking like the game chat to Discord. But it's definitely not as good as the one we made for Minecraft at the time. Anyway, that's so basically Discord is the main thing, and then from there, all the other platforms I'm trying to just use as duplicates for anyone who is like more native to those platforms. So yeah, that's basically that. So I'll probably go deeper into the actual OrbitMines history from before this project at some point as well. But that's definitely not my main goal right now, which is this thing I've been working on for the last 2 years. So in the Discord as well, you can see some things I've been trying to figure out the last couple of years, 2 years. And in it is basically the things I've arrived at after thinking about programming languages, compilation, compression for a long time. And I basically kept abstracting away from them. And whenever, or whatever kind of ideas I wanted to figure out in order to actually understand what programming languages are or how you should think about them, it's always ended up at some, or the most abstract way of thinking always led me to something like graphs. And that's basically how I've arrived at this thing I've made a few, or at least published a few days ago, which is somewhat similar to how you're usually thinking about, let's see, a graph with nodes and edges, but it's trying to talk about them in a way where you're not assuming a lot about what the actual structure is or what you're actually doing within them. Because usually when you're thinking about graphs, you're assuming a lot from outside the graph, whether it's additional values like here at the nodes, or letters or whatever it is. You're assuming a lot from outside the graph because it's useful as an abstraction, but it's not really intuitive to think from within the graph, as in, how do you construct these letters if you're only allowed to be within that graph? And so I'm constantly trying to, I constantly try to iterate on some ideas, and I kept ending up at this idea, which is pretty pervasive in like a lot of fields, which is usually when you're talking about it this way, it's you have a particular perspective on some ideas, and you're only actually talking about that particular perspective, not more perspectives in general. So when you're talking about nodes and edges like this, you're not actually considering all possible ways in which you could interpret them, or you could say an edge, like one of these edges, you can conceptualize them as being another node in another graph. And so what a lot of things in computer science and probably mathematics as well, I'm not entirely sure, do is they're always trying to translate from one thing to another, while at the same time forgetting the fact that you did that translation. So instead of saying, okay, well, this is a node here, if I wanted to put like an edge like this on that node, I would translate to a completely different visual in order to put that edge on a node, which is incredibly useful. But again, you're arriving at this thing that you need to do that outside the actual graph. You're basically using your the fact that you already have access to how you're usually drawing or thinking to translate, but you're not used to thinking about translating within the structure itself. So that's the problem I kept getting back to, and that's how I've arrived at the ideas behind the current project and what I'm trying to do with it. So let's see, what's a good place to start? Maybe a quick example of why this is useful is maybe a good place to start. So whenever you're talking about programming languages or like anything really, so this could be you looking at something, or in the case of physics or something, how you're looking at something, how you're looking at something through like a microscope, or just different ways of viewing the same sort of thing. You could say the same thing about programming languages. So if I'm working at like one layer, which is Python for this in this instance. Below that are so many layers of abstraction or possible ways of looking at the same kind of thing that you don't really necessarily have access to all those layers. So in this library, you see that in everything. You have you basically have physics, the hardware. Above that, you have waves of describing more different abstract models. Let's see, where is this? In this code base. Not actually looked through this that much. So there are many projects which describe the hardware which is trying to implement a specific thing in physics or whatever the thing is it's actually implemented in. And above those layers, you have all the layers of compilers, programming languages, and there is not really. There are a lot of projects like LLVM and other compiler things which try to give you access to all those different layers in some way, but you don't necessarily natively have access to all those layers at the same time. Say I'm thinking about Python or any particular programming language, and I want to access at the same time while it's running a different mode at which it's running. So say at one layer of abstraction, it's running in a particular way, in another layer, it's running in other ways. You can't necessarily, without a lot of work, go down all those layers. You don't necessarily have access to them. And even if you had access to them, which you could do by programming something incredibly complex, you don't necessarily have either a good way of talking about them. It would take a lot of work to actually properly talk about them. And mostly it's also the case that whenever you're trying to translate something, there isn't a perfect translation, and you don't have a good way to deal with the fact that there aren't perfect translations. And so the simplest case of where I've arrived at in order to actually start answering questions like that is this very simple visual language, or it's not really, you could probably say it's a visual language. But it's basically saying, okay, well, there's one way of looking at a node, which is an edge. There's one way of looking at an edge in the sense that it's a node. And it really depends, not necessarily on what the thing is, but how you look at it or how you interpret it. So you want a way to describe what the thing is within the structure itself. Actually, let's just quickly, before I only keep abstracting away from the actual problem, let's go through this thing I made really quick. It's probably a good way to understand what I'm actually getting at here. Let's see. Let me double check if I didn't miss anything before I go further. I had a few things planned, and at the end I'm probably going to work on a specific thing, and then there's no real script anymore. Not that there actually is. Let's see. All right. Yeah. Okay, I'll just go through this. So, oh wait, my screen has been here the whole time. Nice. Okay, I need to actually switch this back. I was pointing to things here on this side of the screen. Okay, anyway. Let's see. Okay, so instead, because you want to be able to point to something like, if you have a point or something which is describing something, the only way to actually do that is to already have some connection to that. When you're having like these usual graphs, it's already assuming that you can. You can't necessarily say, okay, I'm pointing to this point, and the way I'm pointing at it, it's not really interesting, or it's not necessarily useful. I just want to say I have something. I don't really give you the details of what the thing is. But you already in order to do that in a graph like this, you need to assume a lot about its structure. So maybe let me put this one on the side as well, so I can like give some live examples. Let's see. Okay, so say I have this yellow. Maybe I should make it a bit bigger. Say I have this yellow point. So this is just a point in the same way that you're thinking about a point here. This is just a way of saying, okay, I have a point and I have a way of pointing to it. So this line through it is just saying, okay, I have a way of pointing to it. If I wanted to say this, the only way to actually do it, say I want to actually describe the fact that I am pointing to this node, the only thing to do that is to introduce another line like this through that point. So let's say let's give it another color actually. Not confusing. What is a good color? Like this. Nope, that's not it. Right, so say I wanted to point to the yellow line. The only way to actually do that is to have something else point through it. So whenever I say, okay, there is some point I'm pointing to, so say the yellow thing is the thing I'm pointing to, the only way to actually do that is to have another thing which goes through it and says, okay, I'm pointing to it. So this is all in with the idea being, okay, you can't actually go outside. If you have a way of pointing at it, it must be obvious from the structure. So if you have a way of pointing to the point, you must do it with something like this. All right. So once you have something like this, you can phrase these two circles on the left and right side. Basically as, okay, this is where this point begins. I don't know what that even means, but that's just where it begins, and this is where it ends. So in the same way that if you could like zoom in on this point all the way on the left side, it would be left side, and all the way on the right side would be right side. It doesn't really matter what it exactly means. It's more of a way of saying, if you can even point to something, you could ask, okay, it begins somewhere, it ends somewhere, and I don't know what that means. Once you are able to do that, you can construct things like lines. So you could say, okay, the beginning and end of one thing are, say I wanted to connect two of these yellow ones. Let me. Ooh. On the x-axis. But then this isn't great yet. This shows that I need some better way to do this. Okay, say I have these 2 points. If I wanted to say, just like I have here, if I wanted to connect them together, the only way of actually doing that is saying, okay, whatever this thing is here is the same as saying it's on this end. So it's basically saying, if I want to go in this direction of this yellow point, if I could continue there, then you would want to end up at this point. So basically what you're saying, okay, this is the red one here, this is the blue one over here. And you basically want to say, okay, whatever these two things are, I want to ignore the fact that there's a difference between these two. As in, over here there is a difference, over here I'm ignoring the distance, so I'm just squishing them together. But what does it actually mean? Or what is a useful way of thinking about it? And that's basically the questions I'm trying to answer here. And it should become obvious in a few steps why this is a very useful way of thinking. Say I didn't know. Say I didn't know why they were connected. They're just connected. the only thing I would see is, okay, I'm at the red point, I'm moving in some direction, and I end up at the blue point. I don't know why the direction is there. I don't know what it means. In the same way, if you're just moving through your room, you can just move, but you don't necessarily know what you're moving through, or some complicated detail of what you're moving through. You can evidently just move through it. But say you had access, or say you had a way of asking, okay, what does it actually mean to move through that direction? What does it mean to move from red to blue? One way of saying is well, whatever it is, you are able to say, well, I'm moving from one point to the other point, and I'm able to say that I went from that one point to the other point. So I have access to some more structure. So instead of just saying, okay, it's just on the next point, and I've got access to additional structure, which says, okay, well, whatever this thing is, it's the same thing as this. So think about it this way. Whenever you're saying something's the same, or there is some relation between things, you're just drawing a line. And a line is just another construction of these points. It doesn't really matter how you actually make this happen. If you can say it like this, it's good enough. So once you have this, you can start doing some very interesting things. And this is actually the only thing you need. The only thing you need is, okay, maybe a way of thinking about this is that instead of having edges and nodes, you just have this structure, and only this structure. It could represent an edge, it could represent a node, it could represent anything. It just depends on other things constructed around it. So I could say, okay, on the left side here is one point, on the right side there is another point, and in the middle is whatever the relation between the two is. Or you could say, this is the point, this is where it ends and where it begins. It doesn't really matter much how you interpret it. Okay, but once I have a way of saying, there's a way of seeing like things that continue in the line and saying, oh, there's actually a difference, but I'm just ignoring it. So say these two are like this. I have a way of saying, okay, well, they're not the same, but I'm just doing as if they're the same. So I got this. You can keep doing it. This is, I think, a good way of interpreting what this means is you could keep asking the question of, say this is my language. Say this is the only thing I could construct as a language. Basically, having access to another layer like this, or another layer like this, is just being able to ask, okay, I have a language, I can describe the language of the language, and I can describe the language of the language of the language. Just asking the same question on a different structure. And you can keep doing this. You can keep basically taking this point in the middle here, and just keep adding more to it. Just like you take this thing in the middle, you basically expand it, and you get this. A way of thinking about it, I'm also going into it here, is not necessarily saying that they are different structures, so this structure and this structure, but just saying they're different ways of looking at the same structure. So the example I always use is pens. So I could do it on the screen, but the example I always use when I'm talking to people is just pens. So I've got my red and blue. Let's see if that's actually on the screen. If I have my red and blue pen, and I wanted to describe whatever it is that is the connection between those two. So this is in the middle is the point, on the ends is like left and right. Same one with this. If I wanted to ask, okay, what does it mean if I'm saying, okay, the beginning and the end are the same thing? What you're basically saying is, okay, I could look at it in a particular way. Say I'm looking from the perspective of the camera. It doesn't really matter how far this point is. There is a way of describing, say, just like on the screen, if I have another pen like this, there is a way of looking at the structure of pens that you don't see the pink one. There's a way of looking at this structure and seeing, okay, there is this a good angle? I'm not sure. I've never done this before on the camera, let's see. So this is a way of looking at the structure in which you would only see a line. This is a way of looking at a structure in which you would only see, or you would see that line, but you would be able to say, oh, but they're different. and you can keep adding to that. So that's basically the perspective you should take on this. It's not necessarily saying what it is. It's saying if you look at it in a particular way, if you look at this line in a particular way, you would see extra detail, or you see a way of saying, oh, there is extra structure here I didn't know was there. But all right. I should probably get some extra water. 1 sec. Okay. So the only thing you actually need to understand is this switching in perspective. And then it's just adding the structure. So from here, you could add more to the line. So saying the same thing with 3 things. You're basically constructing a line which is longer. Saying instead of adding to the line here, you could add to this line. You get something like branching. So after going from, say I'm following like the red direction from left to right. And I end up at this line. I'm saying, okay, well, it's not necessarily that there's only one possible way of continuing further. There are 2. So you get branching, merging. But there probably are some other ways of interpreting this. They're just interesting structures. Let's see. Anyway. So when you're thinking about it this way, so say you have this way of pointing to things, the way you actually make things like numbers is just using one of these directions. So say I have 2 options, and I wanted to, so the number 0 and 1, or the number 1 and 2, or it doesn't really matter, just 2 things. Could be my mouse and my keyboard, just 2 things. If I want to point one of them out as in saying, okay, it's this one, one way of doing that is just taking one other direction, just like I did here. Putting it through it and saying, okay, and this way it's blue, and this way it's red. Don't really need to know the details of how this actually works yet. But that's basically the well, there's a good way of thinking about this. I think this is like the simplest example, or one of the simplest examples, of why, compared to like a usual way of thinking about graphs, is slightly different. Okay. So instead of, say you have a normal graph, this one or something, and you see the, it's like really small. This one. And you have letters like this. What are you saying when there are letters on the points? Well, one way of looking at it is just like here, when the yellow direction, or the yellow point, just like here, is a way of having, or saying there is something here, but I don't know what it is. If you want to specify what that is, like saying there's an A, B, C, D, or whatever on that point, you need extra structure. So instead of going outside the graph and saying, okay, it's not the abstract idea of a graph in which you have letters on points, it's saying, okay, well, these are the letters. Whenever I have a point, I'm saying this is a letter. So this could be the letter A, this could be the letter B. It really depends on structure, and why you can point to more intricate structure here, like an actual drawing of an A, is just more detail on this point. So you could also, on this point, have like a grid pattern, which has like the letter A drawn into it, which is linked to another layer, which says, oh, this is the letter A of the alphabet in English or something. But it's a much more complicated structure than just having 1 or 2 options. But it's the same principle. You could do that here as well. So if you actually want to construct things like more detail, like A, B, C's, without with actual visual structure, as in it's a visual A, you need more detail than just this. But like this, you have numbers and symbols, so basically you can already construct computers like this. You don't need more. And then what this allows you to do is something which is a lot harder with the usual way of thinking about graphs. Is, say I have this point, and I want to bend the blue one on the point as well. So I'm basically saying, okay, it's A or B, or it instead of saying it's A or B, I would say it's A or B. So I want to say, okay, well, what does it mean if it's both at the same time, or whatever you would like to say? There are many ways of doing this. One is, oh, there's just a third option. You have A, B, or A and B. But the problem is you're, again, just like with the graph, you're relying on some way from the outside to say, oh, well, it's A, B, and the third option is actually the two options, but at the same time, which is completely different than saying there's three. So this way of thinking, you're not saying like it's three different structures. It's a completely different structure at all. Like what you want to say in A, B, or A and B, the only way of actually constructing that from the perspective of the graph is having some way to this third option. So the green one is the third option. It needs to somehow link back to the blue and red one. And so you can't just say that it's the third option, because then it's just A, B, and C. Because the C part doesn't really have access to what it means. If you want the C part, so the third option, to actually have some structure or have something which says what it actually means to be the third option, then you need more structure like this. So this is something completely different. I'm not sure if I have a rendering of it. Oh wait, I might have. But again, with when you have a structure like this, which you can shift as a perspective to this. The same you could say about this thing, which looks a bit more complicated. There's a way of like switching this perspective in which you would basically see, okay, what does it actually mean to say there's multiple things at this point? So multiple things at a superposition like this. So it's either the red one or the blue one or both at the same time. It doesn't really matter. But you could like stretch out the inside of the yellow point and see, okay, whatever it is, it's some red line. So some red line, and it goes through this point I'm describing, and it goes through it again, through another point. So again, it's a way of showing that there are different perspectives of looking at this thing. I'm not sure. I think this is somewhat more intuitive of what I actually mean by this. So, hello, Robin. Welcome. So it's basically this. Okay, the yellow direction is basically me pointing to the thing. It's this one. And then if I want to say, well, what does it mean to have them both at the same time? That means, okay, well, whatever the thing is I'm selecting, it's both. So it's both the red one and the blue one, and they go back to the same point. But you can look at it in a way in which you have access to more structure. Yeah. Now I do remember. Not like the last time. Last time I had like an actual few months in between before I actually talked to you. This time I do remember. Now you can see all the abstract vagueness of my mind. Well, today I tried setting up like a few things for this stream yesterday. And my NVIDIA drivers basically died on me. So I went up to like 4 a.m. in order to fix them, and only then did they actually work. Then I tried setting up the stream like 2 hours ago, and it again failed. So through all that struggle, I'm actually doing quite nice now. But yeah. So I wanted to start the stream earlier, but now I'll just do it like this. Now I'm well rested again, sort of. Anyway. What I'm basically trying to say here, get back to this thing, is you can have a way of describing numbers, superpositions, whatever you want, any kind of structure, only using this kind of thing. And it should probably be obvious why. But it's probably not necessary to actually go into that. It's much more... once you intuitively get this part, like only this part, seeing this line and seeing it from a different perspective like this, then you actually already have everything you need. If this part is clear, then the rest should be clear as well. Because from there, the only thing we're basically doing is, okay, we have 1 point, which is like a 0 or 1. In this case, 0 would be red or A or whatever. And I'm basically saying, well, what if I have 2 of them? Well, just like this. 2 points, different kind of structures. If the stream is something offline, it is its video card driver failure. That is basically the point, probably. I had it die on me earlier today as well, so we'll see. So far, we're going without it dying. Oh, nice to see, by the way, that the Discord chat thing is actually working. For now. As in, it's not linked to other platforms other than YouTube and Twitch right now. Eventually, it probably will be. Okay, anyway. So, you can keep having different kind of structures. One of them is saying, okay, there's a way of describing the fact that it's like red and blue as this. So you just have a list of 2 things, it's red and blue. Or you could like take this line. Okay, so say my 2 fists are that line. There's a way of looking at it, which is just tilting that thing, and you would just see this. So you still have access to the fact that they are 2 different lines, but you were just referencing them not as 2 points, but as 1 point. Which is different from saying something like this. So in something like this, you're basically saying, okay, well, this red direction and this blue point here is back here as well. Which is, there is a very good example in programming languages why these 2 are very, very different from each other. It's probably not worth going into detail about it now. I got 2 video cards. One is one I bought myself, the RTX 4090, and yeah, I'm not sure which one. MSI. I forgot which one. I forgot the vendor. MSI, and I got the second one. I didn't actually buy myself. That's this one. I got that from Intel's graphics research team. They sent a lot of free ones out to people trying to research graphics or AI and stuff. So I randomly, like, I think I reacted to John, or saw John Carmack tweeting about this, and then just sent out one email, and then suddenly, while I was like a few months ago, I just randomly got an email saying, okay, well, you're supposed to get one, apparently. No, it's not the actual card, it's the driver. So the software communicating with the hardware. I probably installed something which crashed it. Crashed it? No, corrupted, that's the word. Anyway. We're like halfway through now. Okay. Now, this part is probably a bit more... It's not as intuitive. It is to me, but it's somewhat harder to understand how it's useful. The other things are more, okay, you've just a simple way of constructing numbers from within the graph. You have a simple way of describing, it's a list or it's a grid or whatever within the graph. But this next part is saying, well, what if you had something where its beginning and end are the same thing. Or basically a circle, a loop, or anything like it, like an infinity or whatever. It's actually pretty hard to... Okay, maybe I shouldn't actually go into... Maybe I should just go into what it means from this perspective. Okay. Say I had a loop. Say I have something which kept repeating. So this could be like the number 1 infinitely repeating to left and right, or doesn't really matter what it is. So in this case, it's like a particular number, which I'm selecting. So this direction is basically saying, okay, well, in this direction, it's like infinitely, you will find more of these. So whenever you go in this direction, you'll find another one. And you can just keep going. That's a way of interpreting like a loop. But saying that the left and right side, or just these two ends, are the same thing, is already hinting at something which breaks down a lot of these descriptions. Because what you're basically saying when you have that is whatever is at that point, it can't change. So in the case of programming languages, whenever I just have some description of some function which is looping, I don't know. Okay, well, maybe I shouldn't do it like this. What is a good way of thinking about this? Just more intuitive. Okay, I should probably just go through this really quickly. Okay. There's a way of thinking about this loop. Okay, wait, I said this example like 2 days ago. This is a perfect example. There is a way of thinking about a loop like this in the same way as you're talking about the perspectives, the switching from perspective here. If you think about like the moon around Earth, or something like the Earth around the sun, there is a particular way of looking. Say you're looking at a flat structure, which is the solar system. It would look like the planets are like perfectly going around it in elliptic curves, or in more of a circular orbit. But whatever the exact kind of orbit is, it looks like a particular kind of loop. Either it's the loop itself is moving, or it's somewhat more stable, like an actual circle like this. But when you switch perspective, so say you normally look at this at the solar system from the from above it, you would see it like that. But there's a way of looking at it in like an extra 3D instead of 2D. Say this is 2D, then this is 3D. You would see that the sun is actually moving, and all the planets are like moving with it, or something like that. The exact example for it isn't necessarily that interesting, but it's more of a way of saying there's a way of looking at a circle in which it's not actually a circle. In order to say like the moon which goes around Earth, you need to ignore the fact that the Earth itself is moving in order to say it's an actual circle. Otherwise, it would just be a coil. There's like an extra difference in dimension. So instead of saying, okay, is it circle? It's perfectly going around the Earth. You have a way of saying, well, you could look at it differently, where, say, the green line is Earth moving, in which the circle isn't like an actual circle, or something like that. It's probably not the best example. Probably come up with a better one. But the point basically being that either something is like actually repeating, or you are ignoring how it's not one. Or how you are ignoring how it's not actually a loop like this. Why is that interesting? Probably not worth going into why that's interesting. I mean, why that's interesting is just showing another way of how a loop is not necessarily actually a loop, or how some infinity is not necessarily actually an infinity. It just depends on how you look at it. There's a particular way of ignoring additional structure like this green line, that it looks like a perfect loop, but it's not actually. And I think that's a pretty good way to think about it. So this thing goes into it in a bit more detail, which is probably a bit clearer than me right now. But the interesting thing is that you could say the same thing of just having two options. Say I have again these two options. Instead of saying it's like a perfect orbit like this, where you go from one option to the other option, from one option to the other option. What if I only want to say, well, it's only these two options and nothing more around it? There's nothing to the left, there's nothing to the right, there's nothing in between. It is basically saying the same thing. It is just saying the loop thing again, but then on another level of abstraction. And say instead of saying it needs to, there's particular direction in which it's always the same, you would basically say, well, in order to keep saying that it's only this and it never changes, you need one of those loops again. So there are probably some interesting ways of thinking about this. If you're thinking about it more in mathematical terms between discrete and continuous or some other things, I think a good way of phrasing it is that it's just moving the looping assumption, or saying the assumption that you're saying it needs to always remain the same, from a pattern like it's infinite in the direction of some line. So infinitely, it needs to be 1. So in one direction, it's 1, 1, 1, 1, 1 infinitely. That is similar to saying, well, it's only ever these two values and nothing more. As in, it's just moving that infinity assumption instead of to the line to another level of abstraction, which is saying it never changes. It's only these two values. Which is probably a way of showing that they're both inconsistent. But again, I should not go into that detail here. I should keep it somewhat high level. I'm going into somewhat more detail in this thing and what I'm trying to say here. Okay, this is a perfect example of why I'm trying to do these streams. I need to be able to communicate them quickly, clearly, which is definitely currently not the case. But okay, let's go to the last two examples quick, and then I'll actually say why anything of this is actually useful. So another way of phrasing it, if I go back to like the example of programming languages or different levels of abstraction describing the same thing, you could say the same. It basically comes down to this. Say I wanted to move in a particular way. Say these two steps from red to blue. Or I had another way of moving from red to this middle thing to blue. From both perspectives, say I only have access to one of these perspectives. It just looks like a line to me. I can't say anything more about it. The only way to actually say, well, one is shorter than the other, is in order to have access to both of them. So that's basically this here. In order to actually see how moving longer is actually longer than something else, I need to have access to that something else. Otherwise, it's just a line to me. So this is basically saying, okay, I need some way of describing the same thing at two different levels. So that's basically what I'm saying here. Okay, there's some line you can draw through these, some line you can draw through these, which is saying, okay, well, whatever these are, it's just talking about one thing in two different ways. Then you can construct something like, okay, well, one path is shorter and one path is longer. Only then can you actually make that distinction. So an example I used here as well is saying, okay, what is the difference between moving and teleporting? So in the more Minecraft context, that's probably how I thought of it, of moving and teleporting in this particular example. But if you're teleporting from one place to another, it's just moving through another. It's the same thing as moving in some sense. But it's a different kind of moving. But why is it different? As in, why does it look different to you? And I think the way of phrasing it is, normal moving is not necessarily different, but you have a way of relating it to how you would move quicker or teleport. say I'm just teleporting across the room, the only way to actually say that's different from normal moving is to know what normal moving is. As in, on some, this is just the same thing of trying to say from a particular perspective, it looks a particular way. Because if you look at me moving right now, either through this camera or from some other particular perspective, there is a way of looking at it where it looks like teleporting forward. As in, I'm skipping over some parts if you look at it in a particular way. So it's just over and over this thing again. Okay, you can describe the same kind of things from different perspectives and having a way of describing that visually. So this is not that interesting, or it is interesting, but not for this. Okay. And then basically this is all a program or moving or whatever something is you have a particular kind of structure, at least if you want to talk about it. You have a particular kind of structure which defines how you can move. And I have, again, some pointer, like this yellow pointer, saying, okay, this is what it is now. The only way to actually move through that is have that thing actually move to another place. This is very simply put, without necessarily going into the details of this thing, been a lot of my thinking the last 2 years, is how do you usefully talk about things at these different perspectives at the same time? And I've basically arrived at this. Okay. Let's see, what is a good place to go to now? Okay, so a bit higher level. Why I'm trying to think about it in this way is, one, like I said, I want to be able to say stuff about some structure from within that structure. As in, I am not allowed to go outside the structure in order to describe it. I need to do it from within. I think you can do things like that with this. But also other things like saying, or very intuitively saying, there was supposed to be something here at this point, but when I actually went there, it's not there. So that's a way of saying, oh, I forgot something. In order to phrase that in like programming languages or other things, it's really, really hard to do that in general. So that's one of the things I was hoping this would actually lead to. And why that's useful is like saying, okay, well, you have things like files, but there's no actual guarantee that when I want a particular file at the computer, that it's actually going to be there. And then how it's usually handled is just some error thrown. But the computer itself can't necessarily search for whatever was supposed to be there. So you have interesting constructions like that, but it's too high level and it's definitely not the point of the project now. What is the point of the project is using this structure and only this structure to program. So why could this be useful? So when I'm thinking about programming, oh wait, let me driver fully updated already. Oh yeah. It's definitely fully updated. It was a problem with I think I installed another package on Linux which corrupted the driver, but it didn't fix itself by reinstalling. Really quick way of describing my agony of yesterday. Let's see. So why all this is useful is whenever I'm already programming in IDE or in whatever kind of structure, you are already doing this. But it's not necessarily easy or useful to think that way. So when I'm just in my IDE and I'm just moving around with the cursor, or creating like this. I mean, don't actually use this feature. Anyway. When I'm selecting things, when I'm changing a letter or anything, you are already doing this. You are already moving in a particular direction, up, down, left, whenever you're changing a letter, you're already moving in another direction, which defines which the letter is. So whenever you change a letter, it's basically taking this one and just dragging it up, and then you have this. So you could define everything you're doing in this way. But just because you can, and as in this should already be obvious when you're thinking about more trying to implement programming or things like it. But it's not necessarily obvious how you would do that in general, or how you would set up a system where if you have a particular, say I have this program here, it's not necessarily, I could figure out how this programming language is structured, how the program, the development environment is structured in order to move through it like a graph like that, or just use the way my keyboard works in order to move through it. But it's not native to how that thing works. As in, I can't like select something in this IDE. The IDE knows that in some way that I have this thing selected, but I can't go into that and say without much effort, why is it showing me this in this particular way, or where is that coming from? But I could write something which would give you an answer to that, but it's not obvious at all how you would do that, and it is probably very, very costly. So for any particular example, you would have to do that. You're not actually solving the problem of being able to do that. Why it's useful is maybe maybe a very simple example of that is just taking some random pixel from your screen and saying, okay, take this pixel. Which programs on my computer are influencing this pixel? How are they doing that? In which programming language? In whatever interesting way do they have access to that? And how do I change that? Or basically, I want to define a way of, okay, you're moving through some pixel on your screen. From the pixel, you're moving through different programs which have access to that pixel. From those programs, you move into how those programs work. From there, you could move to different levels of abstraction of how the programming language is actually operating on that computer device or whatever. But I want to be able to do that in a way where you don't necessarily have to solve the same kind of problems more than once. And that's why I'm thinking this abstractly about things. So I want this kind, and that's where this kind of structure comes in. And I'm probably going to, okay, maybe some simple examples, just some visual examples to quickly show why this is interesting. So in the case of no, this is definitely not right. What am I doing wrong here? Probably only attuned to this. It is. Okay. Say I want to describe a line of pixels on my screen. Say every point on the screen has a Boolean or just one value. It's basically saying you have that line structure, or just the lines and pixels, and to have within each of those points or those pixels, you have additional structure. And basically what I'm doing now is I'm working on some, I want to get rid of this translation. As in, now I'm constantly working in programming language and I need to run it in order to run this thing visually. I want to, at some point, only work visually in this. So it's the same way as you're moving here with just lines and arrows, or any controls you could use to move around here. I want to be able to phrase it in this. And at the same point, if you have a way of giving me, okay, this is what this IDE, or this is what this program is supposed to do, or how you can move through it, because it's just the same thing, you can phrase it in here. As in, I could work exactly how I'm working here already in this structure, without even knowing I'm working in the structure. That's how I want to phrase existing things, and then from there have a way of better navigating through it. Okay. So, I'm not entirely sure how clear it is, why this is useful, or why I'm thinking about this. But let's see. I'll just talk about what I am going to do for the rest of today. Unless if there even is someone, if there is a question. Oh, would you look at that? There actually is someone. Hello, Casper. Okay. So, what I wanted to do, there are several projects I'm looking at in order to either implement this or look at those kinds of projects because they look interesting to me, in order to either implement on this or try to understand them better. So one of them, I probably won't get to this today, is Tinygrad, which has like access to a lot of abstraction layers, very close to hardware, and other things which communicate with hardware, which is probably why it's a very interesting project to me. Because what it's actually doing is you just have a grid like this, but then let's see. So basically all it is something like this. It's just a grid of these kinds of points. And at each of those points, it has a number. So in this case, it could be, I mean, you could have it something like this. This is not the right one. I wanted red. What is red again? Oh wait, it's probably something like this. This is blue. So at each of those points, it basically has a number, and that's all it's doing. So there's a very simple structure, which it's operating under. And all these different layers of abstraction are all translated to that. Hello. Maybe my computer is too slow doing all the things it's currently doing. This is definitely not supposed to be this slow. No. Nice. But just like you can describe your screen like this, you can describe everything that library is doing with a grid like this, numbers on each of the points. But why it's interesting is they have a lot in a very small code base. They have a lot of layers of abstraction. So I basically want the whole story I just made. I want to at some point this project and some other things as well. And a lot of projects which are also connected to this, I want to be able to explain them within this structure. But because the whole thing I'm currently working on isn't actually that sophisticated yet, a very simple example I found See, how did I find this one actually? It's from a professor in Cambridge. How did I find him actually? I think this was the first project I found from him. Let me quickly look how I actually found this guy. Oh, now I remember. Okay. Anyway, it's just it's a very simple way of doing a lot of similar things to what I was talking about just now. But there is some more concrete computer science theory or category theory behind it. So I basically want to implement this thing just to show, okay, this is exactly what this thing I've been working on is supposed to be able to very natively, very easily already do. So I quickly looked through some of the code, and it's looking a lot of things were looking very, very simple to express within the thing I'm currently working on. So basically, what I want to do is implement this thing, which is similar to what I was just pointing out. You have a way of describing it graphically, just as I can describe it graphically. There is tied to that a way of describing it. It's still graphically, but it's in letters or a particular kind of language developed for this thing particularly. So you could see, okay, you have like layers on how it's actually working in a computer. You have above that this layer, which is this this text, and above that you have the layer which is the visuals. And I want to be able to like translate that into this, show either my interpretation, that, or the textual interpretation all at the same time. And in the case of like letters, move through it with how you would usually use your keyboard. And in the case with the graphs, actually use like more different kinds of navigations you would more see in things like games. Arrow keys, or just like move up and down, left, right kind of things. And then once you have something selected, so say I have select a random point of these. Let's see. Let's make it white, because that will definitely stand out. Probably not. This is not where it's supposed to go. Oh, because it's rotating. Nice. Oh shit, this is so slow. Okay, I'll just do it like this. Okay, that's not clear at all. No. Okay, so this is definitely something I want to get rid of. Okay. So say my cursor, so in the same way as text, my cursor is just this with white line. And this could be something, I could reference not only this point, but many points at the same time. Just like I could, that's why I wanted to show that example. So in this IDE, I could put multiple cursors through this thing, but I forgot how to actually do that. Is it like, no, it's not like that. Either way, it doesn't really matter. But you have a way of like moving through this, just have some selection, which is just this thing, and you're moving through it like this. So if I wanted to go to the right, I hit the right key, I go right up, that way. If I wanted to hit another key, so this could either be 0, 1, any other letter in the case of the text, or whatever, it's going to put a letter on there. And then you can, in the same structure, have different languages. So either it's like doing this kind of structure just with lines, or you could show letters, other kinds of visualizations, which would just break down to this same thing. Either way, this is basically what I want to do now. Let's see. So on the one hand, because it's a very simple example, it will very quickly show why this is a very useful way of thinking, and it will help me like make the project a bit more concrete. So unless other people interrupt me, I will definitely work on this after a quick break. Let's see. So there are like a lot of other things I want to at some point implement within the project, but now it's currently just looking for a very simple, concrete example to show why it's useful. And then from there, I'll actually do other very cool things. I have a lot of interesting things planned. One of them is definitely more leaning into the... okay, one more thing. I guess a way of thinking about this is you have your mouse and keyboard, you have your screen, your operating system, or whatever it is. You have this program, you have the programming language in it, but they're all usually all designed separately. So they're not necessarily natively hooking into each other or optimally hooking into each other. So what I expect will be the result is that this kind of thing will eventually be much more like a video game than actually programming, or if it's not, the goal is probably to make it more like one. So there's a way of just moving through it like very simply, very without it actually feeling like a game. But once this thing is set up, probably making the link to making it feel like a game is not that hard. So that's definitely where I'm headed. But that's all likely because all those interfaces aren't like natively adapted to each other. So there's a way programming languages usually work, the context around them in operating systems, how you work with files and stuff, which constrains you in how you, or doesn't necessarily constrain you, but it forces a particular kind of thinking about how you should build programming languages, because you don't need your own infrastructure. You don't need additional things other than just having a simple file structure, which is just the same as any programming language, which is just text, and all the complicated things is all handled behind the scenes. And I kind of want to move away from something like that, but not necessarily in a way that you neglect all the other things which have already been made. So those are like a few things I want to be able to do in this project, is have a way of very easily, very conveniently accessing things which other people have made, or anyone wants to use, without necessarily having to compromise on the fact that you have to work in that kind of structure. So if there's an operating system, a file system, a particular way of interacting with it, that's fine. But it shouldn't constrain how I'm designing the interface. So the main focus is on its visual interface and how it's actually implemented, or how it's actually interacting with other components. Is it necessarily that important, or not yet? Probably will at some point. Is that really the point I wanted to make? Probably not as accurate as I wanted. It's it's just a different way of seeing why programs are the way they are. Instead of having the usual way of thinking about text, I want to be able to say, okay, why is this A and A? And how is it constructed? How is it there? And that's basically the point I made earlier. And this is basically the same kind of thing. If you want to define what something is, I need to be able, or I want to be able to phrase, not necessarily have access to it, but I want to be able to phrase what it means to have access to additional context of what that means very, very quickly. So say what this white point I've got selected is an A. I want to have one of these directions into it, which says, okay, at some level of description, this means an A, which is just a longer line of like an alphabet. On another level of description, so just another point on some line. You have a way of describing it visually, like I said. So in like a grid pattern in which the grid is different values, more like a gradient or like or just a more complex structure like this. Anyway. Okay, I'm going to quickly take a break and then actually work on something interesting. So I'm expecting that I'm going to have a lot of moments where I'm saying, oh, wait, this is actually very, very easy to implement. What is the best way of putting this on the screen? Probably something like this. So once I have something working for this, the goal is probably to get things like WebAssembly or other infrastructure around it to more effectively communicate with hardware, with other things people have built, in order to at some point be able to say, okay, give me what kind of structure, what kind of program you have, and I'll give you an interface for it. It doesn't. That's one of the things I want to be able to do, and what this probably should allow. Or at least I will give you a way of constructing one yourself very quickly, very easily. All right, I'll be right back. 1 second. Right, I have a screen for this. Let's see. All right, so I expected my throat not to like talking so much, but it's another thing to experience it. Let's see. Looks like all the streams are still working. Yeah. Actually, once all the problems with the driver are resolved, it's somewhat smoothly. Albeit that I'm not actually that comprehensible, probably. All right, so Chyp. Another sort one of the simple examples. No. Robinius. Okay. So it is very quickly auto-generated. So what I'm thinking of doing is translating. I could probably be more pragmatic and make some actual code to translate between the way it's implemented in Chyp to some form in TypeScript, which I can just put in the browser and display this way. But I actually want to understand it much better. So I'm probably going to very slowly go through it and just implement the methods so that people who are familiar with Chyp have like a very direct way of saying, okay, this is the interface I'm used to in Chyp. There's like a direct translation to how I'm thinking about it this way. Another thing which I hope this project will be able to do much easier at some point. People have a particular way of looking at it. And I want to translate it to a different kind, that they have a very easy way to show how that's done. And you can directly interface it. Switch between different perspectives very easily. That is what I want to be able to do. All right. Let's see. All right. From here. Oh wait, this is in front of my webcam. I mean, it doesn't matter much, but I should probably then put it to the left like this. Okay, I'm not going to use that probably, so I'll just put the code up instead. And I'll just do it like this. I'll just go back and forth between the graph. All right. So the first way I thought it was easy to translate a lot of these is which example did I see? It was something in graph. Oh, okay, yeah. So that's not what I was going to do. I was going to do it like this. So when you have something as simple as saying like this, so I think the idea behind the string diagram is that you, on the left and right side of Chyp, of each of those diagrams, so of these diagrams, on the left you have your inputs, on the right you have your outputs, or at least that's the idea. Oh, that's not on the screen. on the left you have your inputs, on the right you have your outputs, which is a lot of like saying, okay, well, you have this structure. On the left you have your input, and on the right you have your output. And so on this side, it's basically saying, well, if there's nothing, let's see. Okay, wait, it says, okay, it's probably doing it in reverse. Basically saying that if there's at some vertex, so some box, to find something on the left of it, then that's an input, and otherwise not. In my case, that's probably inverted. So on the left side, if there's no additional structure to find there, you could say it begins there, so it's an input. So what is a good way of... Okay, so what I basically want to do is this. If I have like the graph, maybe I should just put these in classes instead. I'll just copy this to another file for now. So I just want class. Ooh, that's not the one. Why did it want to go to this file? Yeah. So there's probably a way of looking at each of these files. So the rewrite rules, the vertices, the edges, the graphs, everything as just the structure, the arrays. So I am going to just translate between them. We have the GUI as well. I'm not entirely sure how the GUI is yet implemented. I've not really looked through the library that much yet. But inputs is just array, which means it could return on a more. It's probably always the case. Okay. There is a way describing these, which I probably should remove. What is a good way of thinking about this? I'm not sure yet. Because you could think about all these functions as being lines through the point, which end up at some place. You could think about them as saying they are lines or directions which I've not yet put on the point. That's one way of thinking about them. Something like this. Iterator here is just traversing through some array. Okay, is there? I'll just quickly do it. I should have separated this somewhere else. But best generated code ever. Why am I struggling to find what I'm looking for? Oh, here. So I probably want const something. Oh, nice. What am I doing? Here. Actually, I'll do it like this. These need to be surrounded by these thingies because TypeScript. All right. So this is just dry setup, which is probably going to be ugly, and I'm probably going to remove it at some point. Just to create an interface from Chyp. So whenever you have an iterator, so if I quickly go, oh, I'm already on that side. Oh, okay, I need to actually better keep track of on which side of the screen I'm at. Okay, so there's a way of thinking about an iterator, which is just this. Say I have just a few points, and I have a way of pointing to a particular value of it. Say something like this. I keep forgetting what red is. So say my line is the yellow line, which I'm just assuming doesn't change. And the red line is just me selecting which one I'm currently have selected. Then when I'm iterating over it, it's moving from the next value. Oh, that's the wrong direction. From the next value to the next value to the next value, etc. So when you have something like this, so this vertices, what you basically have is you just have some line on which those points are. So in this case, it's just a simple list of parentheses, which they're iterating over. So it doesn't need to return an iterator. It could return a list. It could return anything, as long as it gives me something which I can iterate over. Well, this thing isn't necessarily iterable. If you have one thing, it's just one. If you want to iterate over it, you just ask, well, what happens if I keep going in this direction? Well, there's more here. What if I keep going in the left direction? There's just more there. So it's already natively iterable. So the only thing you actually need to do is, like, this necessarily already switches perspective from, say I have the, okay, this is basically what it is. It knows what the yellow line is, and it gives me something which is the red line, which can move through it. So the iterator. Iterator doesn't necessarily know what the yellow thing means, but that can move through it. So whatever v data is. Oh, they don't have the properties on here. I mean, the properties are just the same thing again. The v data in this case. Just more arrays. Okay, so v data here is just a dictionary. Oh, well, it's a dictionary. Let's see. So this is iterator. All right, I need to move my screen. This is just the iterator. Then when I have a grid, it's just a dictionary. So, or at least there are probably many ways of looking at a dictionary. It really depends on how it's implemented in Python or however we're talking about it. But I can say one thing for sure, which is it's 2 lines. It's 2 lines in the grid. So it would be vertical. Say one line is the keys, one line is the values, and you have another way of like relating them to each other. The particulars don't really matter that much. There are a lot of ways to actually usefully implement them. But either way, it doesn't matter. It's still a structure. It's still an array. So this is basically the whole point. Whatever it is, it's always the same thing. It just depends on the context to find around it, how it's interpreted, what is done with it. Let's see. Mapping from integer identifiers to each vertex in its data. So you could say that one of these points, let's actually do it like this. Like one of these points has additional structure in it, which is supposed to be an integer. So it's a dictionary from integer to vertex data. So one point has the vertex data, one point has the integer, and you have a way of relating the two. You have a way of moving through all possible keys, a way of moving through all possible values, and you can relate them all to each other. So this is great dictionary. Blah blah blah. So again, properties are the same thing. Properties are just you could similarly see them as a dictionary. You could see them as just additional lines, functions. Doesn't really matter what they are. Oh wait, properties work differently. Okay, I need to not implement it like that. No, wait, if I'm returning, just quickly put, oh. Arbitrary. Didn't I already have one like that? No, yeah. Yeah. Hmm. Do I just use arbitrary? I mean, it's more that the property itself is arbitrary. Can I do that in TypeScript? I'm not sure. This needs to be... I don't think you can do that in... So it would be like the return type is some array, but the function itself is like a function to something. I don't think you can do that in TypeScript. Let's see, can you do this in TypeScript? Well, you can of course do it in another interface, but I don't really want to do that. Alright. It's basically like that. Vertex data, mapping from integer identifiers to each vertex data. This is just auto-generated? I don't know. Oh, I did some rename from Chyp to Chyp canvas, and it's like propagated through this one as well. Reversible the changes. Yeah, so the graph is it's basically one particular direction, arbitrarily defined, so a hypergraph. Okay, so this is basically just a wrapper around array. Okay, so another thing, what this wants to do is because you only want to be able to work within like the graph structure. The only way, oh wait, I forgot. Oh shit. Oh, that's not nice. Kept pointing to nice examples. Like that. Okay, eventually I'll get the hang of that. What was I saying? Okay, so basically a graph, a hyperidge, or a hypergraph is just one line. Because a line could be arbitrarily defined at each of these continuations, so it's a hypergraph. See. Okay, so why is it built like this? So this basically gives you a way of iterating through the line. This basically gives you a way of iterating through the middle points of the line, so the edges. So the relation between the two. This is basically a loop, or length is just a loop around, which moves around one line and keeps adding more to it. So you could see it as just one circle. I probably can't depict this that easily yet. Maybe I'll try. Let's see. Say you have where are you? I need you. Loop. Not gonna be great. There we go. So I just have some loop. Why is it? Oh, it's not good. Skill. Anyway, it doesn't really matter much. So whenever you have like a counter, it's like a loop, which is like looping through a particular direction. I'm not sure how to like draw that yet. I probably need to think about that offline. One way of thinking about it is whatever it's doing is on it or in it. There is, oh, that's not good. Maybe I should make this bigger. Not it. Yeah, I definitely need another editor as soon as possible. This is not. Okay. Okay, so one way of thinking about it is you have this thing or on it, or just some memory in it, which at each iteration, so while it's going through this line, so while it's moving through the line, it has a counter, so it has additional memory. In its memory, it's like, say this yellow line is the memory. Like moving through it, it's going from 1 to 2. When it's going to the next one, whatever the memory is, it's adding another. So it's definitely won't be actually stored like this, because this would not be great. You would store this in bits or other kinds of structures. But that's essentially what it's doing while it's counting. So whatever the like something like this is, it's just some direction which keeps following, and you're not sure like how long it will take, and then at some point it might stop. So that's basically what this is, and then it wants to give you like the memory it has on how long it's gone. So this is memory. So that's basically what the counter is. So there are multiple ways which you could return to with a counter like that. So in this case, you would just want to return the result. But more generally, you want to also give the loop. You want to give the thing which does the iterating, because you're not sure whether or not that will actually halt or not. But for this, it doesn't really matter much. So I should probably, like, what is a good way of implementing like a count? It's probably just, I mean, if you have the iterator, just that memory. But quite independent of what you're doing, you want this structure. So now I'm defining a class in TypeScript. And if I'm implementing it usually, that doesn't necessarily give the graph access to all these methods as well, or whatever this structure is. So how the array is set up, or probably going to be set up, is within a structure like this, it needs to be able to reference parts of arrays or other arrays. So that means that you can have an instance of array or some object array, which itself doesn't necessarily want to give away information of what it is, but it's pointing to something. So from particular perspectives, you might not necessarily have access to what it is, but it's pointing to something. So as a way of saying something like this, if I because you want to be able to do things like reference. Wait 1 sec. Let's see. Because I want to be able to do this, but not only that, you want to be able to say I'm pointing to this side. I'm pointing to the other side. And in order to do things like that, the program itself must be able to like abstract away from this structure and have some way of pointing to it, which it does through another one of those lines. So you could see whenever you have this class or whatever I'm doing in TypeScript as just another one of these directions again. Which is like pointing to it. So when I'm talking and I'm showing you this structure and I'm pointing to this side, it's basically me saying I'm the white line. And now again, when I'm showing you this and I want to show the whole thing, I'm basically saying there's another direction on here which I'm not showing. So it's basically that principle. And you can just keep adding to that. You can just keep adding, well, I'm referencing, then I'm referencing, then I'm referencing, stuff like that. So this gives you at least a way to usefully think about it. And hopefully a way to bootstrap the language within the language itself. If that even makes sense, probably not. Okay, so I have not actually implemented anything like writing. I'm probably going to have to at some point. I might just use whatever implementation is used here. It's probably easier. Right, I'm going to define a lot of dummy methods and then at some point fill them in. So the length thing is basically saying you want a method which counts, which actually means I want a program which can iterate over a particular array, which is itself array. I'm not sure yet how I'm going to do that. We'll see. I'll just define methods like this. It's the same thing. Mm. Okay, maybe I'll throw away these options just to make the interface a bit easier, and then I'll take care of that later. Okay, so this is just a vector data. I should probably copy this. This is so okay. This is definitely not what you should do. Just easier for now. You want to be able to. This is why I want something like this, like the thing I'm building right now. It's very hard to make something which very reliably says, okay, I'm trying to map this structure into this structure, and I just want to copy this. And whenever this changes, I want this to change. As in, you can construct things like that, but it's definitely not easy to do such a thing in general. But for now, it's just all by hand. Just by hand so I can understand the scope better. So is this like a cache? Why is this? Add inputs. Oh, okay, so these are mappings. Okay, this is a perfect example of how this will probably work very nicely. Okay. Whenever you have this graph, it's like, oh, it's doing something very, very similar, but this way is just better, probably. Or a more general way of describing it, it's doing the same thing. The inputs and outputs here are basically saying exactly what I was describing. Let's see. So this is being able to reference any part from within the structure. It's basically, I don't know what it's called, self-compiling. I don't know. But basically, what this is saying is something I've shown before. Is this? What is pink again? With like 5 Fs on each side. Yeah. So if I take that example from the thing I wrote. That's not right. That's even worse. Alright, this is definitely going very smoothly. Let's see. So that's one side of the continuation. If I just read it properly, this is exactly why this perspective thing is useful. The inputs and outputs here, well, I just saw. Let me confirm that before I actually talk about it. Yeah. So this is basically used to connect them together, I think. So whenever you have these diagrams, whenever you have like this one, if you have this one as a separate diagram and this is another diagram and you want to like stick them together, this input output thing is used to like link the inputs and outputs. Which is also kept track of how much information is, or whether or not they're are inputs or outputs, or whether it is an input or output. Which is just the same thing as this. It's just switching perspective. It's if at this end, at this point, there is additional structure defined, so in this case this, then you can follow it like that. So in this case, it's probably like on the blue, if the graph is this blue thing. So this could be a complicated structure. If this graph is the output, so the right side is the output, saying that there's something in this variable outputs is, let's saying, oh, it's this pink line. The pink line is this, on which is defined the number of the red vertex, which is coming from somewhere else. So you can see there's a lot of like indirection in thinking this way and not so much in thinking this way, which is also probably a lot of similar ideas within this project. That's why I wanted to implement this one first. So much similarity. So this is like saying, what's at the terminal? I'll just do it like this for now. Same for the inputs. The inputs is then what's at the initial side. Basically, additional. What is a good way of phrasing this? Additional structure defined. Is this the case? Wait, am I missing something? Maybe it's like linking the fact that there are outputs on the graph on that. So it's the reverse thing again. So it's saying that these should be interpreted as outputs. Okay, I'm not entirely sure yet. We'll find out. Maybe I should like start at something different. I'll just leave that for now. What are these indexes? Vertex index, edge index. We'll find out. Okay, so I'll just do it the old way. That's how I used to refactor OrbitMines code. Just remove until you've abstracted it all. Or translated it all. In a very slow way. Let me quickly grab a drink. So initialize is basically saying when you find the structure, this is what it's supposed to be. These are probably not at all interesting. These are just sitting on all as empty, which is the default for us. Is it the same with 0? It's a number. Yeah. Ignore for now. So vertices is like saying like the fee data is saying it's a dictionary, which is array, which is. Oh, I want to do this. Iterator part is easy. But do I want to keep this structure? Or do I want to abstract away from it? What am I making right now? I've been working. Like the last 2 years, I've been trying to abstract away from programming language to understand what they actually mean, or how you could think about different programming languages at the same time. And what I've basically arrived at is something very close to probably category theory and something like hypergraphs, which is saying, okay, just with these kinds of lines, I can say anything about numbers, structures, grids, graphs, number lines, alphabets, whatever it is. And so I'm trying to create an interface in which I can only program in these, and then from there put additional structure on each of the points. So you could see this as, I'll quickly give you an example. You could see this as a grid, as in your screen as a grid, on which each of those points you have like additional color values for whatever the pixels are supposed to mean. And I'm trying to currently make a very simple implementation of this idea. Using something a professor in Cambridge made. So that's basically this thing you see above here. That's not mine. So I'm basically trying to put his ideas in a different interface, which I'm trying to make. If you go earlier in this stream, well, then you can't follow live. There is, it's probably not that great, but I'm trying to go into detail about what I'm actually doing. And otherwise, I have a link for you. Let me share it with you. Which is more abstractly trying to like think about this. Let's see if this goes through. Oh yeah, nice. Which is like going through these ideas somewhat slowly. Like describing how you can, with this, have numbers, have structures like lines, different perspectives, superpositions, grids, loops. And so the long-term goal is basically make programming more like video games. But now, very quickly, is trying to implement this idea from a professor in Cambridge in this structure. So I'm basically taking his code, translating it very slowly by hand in order to understand it better to TypeScript, and then link it to this thing. So everything in this entire language, it's you could see it as a language. It's basically this one class, which is just oh wait, you can see the left side. Nice. It's just this one. I'm trying to translate his code into TypeScript code, just one-to-one, very slowly. Everything in this language is basically this one class, which is like this structure, or any point of this structure. No worries, no worries. Yeah, it is coded in Python. I'll give you a link to the... it's called Chyp, Co-spans of hypergraphs. So I was debating whether or not to actually put it in Python as well, because his thing is already there. But the goal of the project is mainly to focus on this interface, which means I wanted to be able to work in a browser on any device, which is just easier. So you could like write it in Python, then write something which allows me to use the Python through WebAssembly in the browser. But that's not really something I want to do. But it's probably, I'll later probably do things in Python as well. But yeah, the props is already coded it in Python. This side, not the interface I'm working on. This application he has built. So he's the professor is more interested in getting, I believe, like this kind of interface I'm working on for quantum physics, or they want a more easily programmable interface for quantum physics. I'm not that familiar with what he wants to do, but I think he got a grant recently to work on this kind of project. But yeah, I'm not entirely sure about its details. I only know that I tried to make something, and then I found this one a few months ago, and I was like, oh, this is like trying to do a lot of things I'm also trying to do, but just differently. Let me quickly grab some tea. Yeah, now is also the first time I'm going into a bit more detail on this project, or at least stream as well. So this is all very new to me. But yeah, I find it incredibly interesting as well. So basically what I want to be able to do is able to describe like 10 different levels, like, or basically from the hardware, describe all the different compilation layers of how programming languages are built, then different kinds of programming languages, and then all those stacks all at the same time, and then be able to translate between them somewhat usefully, not perfectly, of course, but if you give me Python, I want to be able to, and if it's compiled like through a project like LLVM to the hardware, I want to be able to like say what those layers are and move between them. Visually, like a game. Let's see. But yeah, now I'm trying to, everyone who knows this project, I want them to just give them a one-to-one like class in TypeScript with a method, and they can just follow from there and what I'm trying to say in the language I'm basically saying it in. So it's all very painstakingly trying to understand this code. Let's see. So the thing, so this thing basically defines inputs and outputs. And similarly, you could say that this structure, this could be an input and an output, or you could say this is an input and this is an output. What is this? Oh, wait, this is just the same thing. Okay, I'm going to do it like this then. These need to be in order, really? That's kind of annoying. Honestly. Just move these two down. So, how does this work? It's a boundary if it's an input or an output. Yeah, which probably means in my sense that there's nothing defined there. I think. Not sure yet, not sure yet. Let's see. This is just matching inputs and outputs together. I need a simpler way to start this off. It's just a wrapper function, so I can just copy that. I can't overload on TypeScript though, that's a bit annoying. That is probably a bit of that is actually pretty annoying. Something like Python is much better for this. That is. Turn vertices that lie on the directed path from any VS. Vertices. I mean, I basically need an execution layer if I want to be able to do it outside of TypeScript. And there's a source first. Does this S come? Okay, maybe I should just go from the data structures first. Let's see. Of error is just an exception. Yeah, it doesn't really matter. Do we want to represent it in the graph as well? Or would we? We probably want to represent this as a boolean. There's two possible values, one if it's successful, the other if it's not. Is that one in here? Doesn't look like it. Let's say the type is string is in there. String or none. Is none in here? None is in here. And these are all just array. String none is array. I mean, this is basically this needs to be this needs to be. Do I need to set run at compile time? Probably not. Where is this used? Probably want all these types at runtime. So I can like display the types as these kinds of structures, superpositions, or whatever else. So these should be const. Const. I mean, all these could be functions. I'll use them as functions for now. So very small like that. Probably. But it means that the default value of the parameters are types, which are structures. I think this is right. Why are these complaining? I can't overload the OR operator. That's really annoying. I don't think TypeScript overloads operators. I don't think you can. Yeah, it's definitely not in TypeScript. Okay, this is really not nice about TypeScript. I mean, they are the same thing, so it doesn't really matter. But it's more for readability from the perspective of knowing Chyp. because you can see the v type and then you're just following it. Okay, so if this is an OR, this is just an addition. So it's just a line. So you basically just have did this continues with this, which is very ugly. Overloading TypeScript. Ew, wait, these need to be not array like this, but array like this. And TypeScript again. This is really ugly. Right. All right, I'm going to see if someone built something for this. Okay. You will write the fucking game engine in TypeScript. If only there was operator over. There probably just isn't operator. Yeah, this is not nice. What is a better way of doing that? Maybe like this. Oh, definitely like this. Yeah. Just take the. Oh, wait, I have a way of doing this much better. Much more clear. Somewhere. Is exported? It is. Purple. Like this. Perfect. Much more clean. Um, Data. which means actually want to do all these at the same time. Um, I can't do this. Oh, it needs to be a space as well. Yeah, like this. This needs to be nested. I'll just do those ones by hand, of course. So we get 1, 2, and 3. I can't optional this. I'll just do like this. Oh, it needs to be an equals default value. Yeah, expected 0 arguments, but got 1. So I want these to be just basically equals again. Well, not equals. What are these? What are these if they aren't filled? Like none? Okay, let's do optional for now. Type state. No, be right back. All right. Where was I? Oh yeah. Why do I do it like this? Is it bad? Why would it be bad? It's not bad actually. Just arbitrary. Did I replace him with everything already? Okay, maybe I need to. Gonna be very icky. My distro is Ubuntu. I'm not entirely sure. The first question is supposed to be some litmus test. I think the answer is always to ignore them, right? Don't have them in the first place. That's the answer. Just a simple Ubuntu setup. Not that specialized. I was expecting that to be the case. Doesn't really matter. This is probably actually a pretty nice way to do this. What am I missing? Like this? What is this method? I have no clue. Something or other related to the UI. No. It's a bit weird. I've never seen that before. Again, it's rolled up. Yes, in this instance. String none. Oh, this is very confusing. It's not that bad actually. Oh, wait. Lol. Nice programming. Let's see. I mean, if it's a type, right? So in this case, if it's a generic type, type array, that means a loop, right? Well, it could mean a loop, it could also just be one thing with additional layer. I'm just gonna do it like this for now and just figure it out later. Probably gonna change. Alright. Okay, so everything at runtime. Yeah. All right. So vertex. How is a vertex constructed? We have a type that's just additional information at the vertex, like the name. So the v type is whether or not there's like a number here or there's a name there that you're using to match to each other, which means it's another array. Doesn't really need to be 8. All right. It's probably not that interesting. Inversize. Whether to invert a vertex type during composition, used for special generators, identifiers, permutation. Redistributors. Probably a hack. Invert type true. Basically, probably this means that copy something from another place. Not that interesting. Put it like this. We need more properties. So we have type, size, inversize, all these. So this is probably another element of what this thing should solve. Is the coordinates of this vertex are like here, which means they're just on another layer in the vertex as a description. But you should be able to, especially with things like this is relevant for the interface and how to render them. Not necessarily anything else. Well, it could be something else. I'm not sure. Maybe he uses it to infer the string diagram and actually uses it to compose stuff. But if he doesn't, then you should probably not put that here. It should be on a different layer. It's not relevant for most things. This class is used for. Let's see. Are we at 3 hours yet? I am wondering whether or not Twitter stream will die at some point. Find out soon. X and Y. Which is in the UI in this instance. Why are you complaining? It doesn't look like a syntax error. This looks like an IDE error. No, it's an IDE error. Probably memory problems. Let's see. The register size, number of bundled parallel wires. So this is a count. Similar to counts. The problem of saying that they're parallel in the interface is that they're already connected on the background of the interface. So you already have a line going through them in the interface. So just use that line. The count over line. Because it's parallel because you have some way of referencing it, which is in sequence. It's the same thing with moving and teleporting. It's parallel because you have another way of saying, another direction in which you're saying it's not, which is your usual way of moving. And then it's parallel if it's not that direction, but it's still moving. Something along those lines. Probably close to that. Probably should have just put these comments automatically. Not useful work. Are these any interesting? Why is it one? Oh, sorry. I mean, these are probably all just lapsing as defaults. You probably don't need to deal with this. Highlight. Just highlight. We have a way of highlighting it. Which is just either, in this case, a Boolean value, just one up and down, or in the case of the interface, just an additional structure. Highlights. Just a Boolean. Box size. Return how many width units box needs to display nicely. This uses a simple rule. If the number of inputs and outputs are both less than or equal to 1, draw as a small 1 width unit box. Otherwise, draw as a larger size 2 box. Okay, this is basically for layout, so that they don't overlap. Just another thing which should be like separate of the abstract structure. Oh no, it does not. No, that's not necessarily the case. If it's used for inference, then not. Otherwise, draw as a larger size 2 box. So that's the difference between. Difference between this one and this one. So this is 2, this is 1. It's another way of extra. In this case, it's again a Boolean value, which is attached to a different way of visually rendering. I'll come back to this. Let's see. Do I want to string any better conversions? JavaScript. Explode vertex. Split the vertex into copies for each input, output, and tentacle. Okay, what is the first thing I want to see? Now I'm like very slowly going through it. But what is the most important part first? Probably actually the restructuring. To the rule, let's go to the rule. Which is this. Whatever. This is another thing I don't want to do, not left, right. Not something more abstract. It should probably be just... I mean, it depends again how you interpret it. Am I thinking it's slow, or am I missing something obvious? Oh, I'm missing something obvious. It's a property. It's a property. These are the graphs. The graphs are just rays. I mean, I could just use graph here because it's just a ray. Is it true? That would mean that it's just a ray. Question is, do I want to return specific classes? Probably not. I definitely don't. Name is just additional structure again. Quiv. Just a hacky way of saying they're equivalent without needing to check it. Add a copy. Right. Is that the case? You're right. What are we doing? Probably need to do the rewrite structure first. It's probably a good idea. Okay. I should probably do something very simple. So definitely not the text. The text can go on later. Definitely the graphics first. Want to be able to like drag and drop the thingies as well. Import Chyp files. And then of course export to Chyp files. Okay, so I want a copy. This is probably pretty tricky with my current setup. Or it's not tricky, but the hacky stuff is tricky. It's definitely something I want to set up. What does the copy return? Like, the copy from the perspective of the array you're currently at gives you another direction to follow, which will not be the same. I mean, any traversal is already necessarily some kind of copy. Anyway. Was not... so copy is already implemented. By default. 3. Generally useful. What do the copies actually do in this one? Maybe I should check before I. Yeah, it's just a full copy. Just ignore it. Oh wait, the inits don't have arguments. That's not great. Do them by hand. Oh wait, this one does. Not all of them. An empty string. Maybe empty string. Doesn't matter. It's a particular structure. Like this. With. Where's the default true? Maybe I should just do it like this. String. I don't need empty string in this one. I just need to string it. Or string with a value here. Oh, that's much better. True. String with a value. String. Be more obvious. String. Empty. What is the opposite? What is this? Oh yeah, it is just the opposite. Switches the name as well. That's hacky. Do I need to implement converse? I mean, from this perspective of, oh yes, I do. Okay. Okay. But the interesting thing with something like a opposite is the you could see the rule as just two sides of 2 points like this. With additional structure on it, which makes it seem like a rule. So the difference is like putting the end here and putting the start here, but that assumes that you can already differentiate between them. As in that this is already the start one and this is already the end one, and not the other way around. Well, there's a good way to. This is not great. Guess it doesn't matter much. Can just put the name on each side of the rule. Let's do that. Put the name. Each side of the rule. Scraps. Random tests. Not interesting. Interesting. What is this? So these are the modular rewrites. Might be a problem in the browser. We'll see. Can I ignore this directory for now? Colors. So this is more the text interface. And the thing that actually does the rendering on the screen. I can probably ignore all this. Just show all this stuff visually. Oh wait, no, I should actually like copy this and allow switching between how it's usually visualized in Chyp and how I'm visualizing it. Yeah. Definitely. Bum. Should probably copy the shortcuts as well. Yep. What are these? Ready edges, layer layout. Simple layout using layer decomp. vertices are evenly spaced around the x-axis. Which should be used. Oh, it was probably just experimenting with different way of visualizing the graphs. We should look at these at some point. Just more rendering. Hmm. Any matches extending self by single vertex or edge. Okay, maybe it's better to first implement some better stuff in this. Just like saying 1, 2 box. I think I'm going to do a lot of these off stream. Then when it's more interesting, go back to stream. Okay, I'll probably stream again tomorrow and then see if there's something interesting as far. Something which is less of this copying. Alrighty. I'll call it by this for now though. Let's see. Alrighty, that's it. I'm going to probably stream again tomorrow and hopefully add some more structure around the things I'm doing slowly. Get more used to this. Get more used to it. Get to a point where I can actually be pretty productive while I'm streaming as well. So probably pretty sporadically or without really any pattern, I'm probably going to keep doing this kind of thing. Let's see. If I do it, it's in some consistency every day. I'll find out. Either way, if there is anyone who watched up till this point, thank you, and I'll see you next time.